Happy Wednesday morning to you. It is Wednesday, February 18th, and I'm going to get on a new rhythm here with our podcast, with some of the videos we're putting out. Um, I've been requested lately from some of our agents that we go back to what we used to do, which we would do a morning huddle virtually every morning. And as a team lead, we got people all over the place running to meetings. We constantly are handling meetings and stuff ourselves. And so the challenge was just preparing and showing up and kind of delivering fresh, ready content on a daily basis. Not to mention, I also have a life that pulls me in different directions as well. And so I'm going to do this in replacement of that as something that someone can listen to on their own time, whether you're on our team, not on our team, but run in the same circles, trying to stay up to date with the information that's out there. And then also we'll theme these up on Mondays, a little more getting the week started, motivational stuff. On Wednesdays, we'll find some skills, and then on Friday we'll bring some other type of content, maybe some what we do, like little mastermind stuff off maybe something that doesn't fit in the normal box. So we'll have fun with these. I want to make them impactful for you. And so please like, share, subscribe, so you can stay in touch. These are things hopefully that you will find value in, and maybe on your way into the office, you were able to listen to them and take away a little something, a little nugget. I think back over my time, kind of coming up in the industry, and how many things I'm just a consumer, still am very much a consumer of content. I like to listen, I like to watch. Um, and the challenge is a lot of these things that we consume, we don't have a place for, at least yet. We don't have an application for, right? We may not even fully understand what we're hearing. Um, but over time, these things stack and these things build. The compound effect of information can transform your business. So I challenge you to stay in the know, continue to consume. Don't be distracted. And I think that's the pitfall for many people is it becomes a distraction to them. And so they're always running and trying to add something new to their plate, trying to refine a new skill. And so we're going to try and keep these hyper focused on the things that matter. Okay. So I want to dive in and share something that I hope is of value to you. So here we go. Jim Collins studied companies that went from good to great. If you've ever read the book, Good to Great, it is a fantastic book you should pick up. He expected to find a breakthrough moment, a genius idea, a bold move, a viral explosion. He didn't. What he found instead was something simple, a flywheel. Let me say that better without my spin on that word. A flywheel. Picture a massive metal wheel, thousands of pounds, sitting still. You put your hands on it and you push, and nothing happens. You push again, still nothing. You lean in harder, it moves an inch. You keep pushing slowly, 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 and eventually it starts to turn. Then it turns a little easier, then faster. And eventually it spins almost on its own. Here's the key: there was no single push that did it. It was every push compounding over time. And that is what this industry is as you learn to become better and better and better at your job. It's the daily grind, it's the daily push. Most agents push twice, 3 times, 100 times and quit. They role play for a week and then they stop. They prospect for a month and they reset. They tweak their scripts constantly instead of refining them. They keep restarting the flywheel over and over and over again. I know you can relate to this if you're listening to this. Great agents don't have more talent necessarily. They just don't stop pushing. They refine one skill: buyer consultations, listing presentations, negotiations, offer writing. They repeat it. They improve one small thing each time. They let momentum build. If your business feels stuck, it's probably not broken. It's early in the push. You don't need motivation, you need momentum. And momentum comes from disciplined repetition. So today, just ask yourself, what is one skill that if you pushed at it for 90 days without quitting would change your income, would change your life, would change your goal? Pick it, push it, don't reset it. Momentum beats motivation. Push the flywheel. So this is um, a section of his book where he goes deep into the flywheel, um, and it's something that I has stuck with me ever since reading it. I read this book a long time ago. I'm going to share with you because I started getting interested in, well, what is a flywheel? Hopefully, you can see these on the screen. Um, and so I started doing a little digging. Like, let me better understand this. Here's one. Here's something we can look at. This is an old school flywheel, right? Something really big. And so the engine, begins slowly grinding. But what happens over time after it's actually moving? Not only is it actually moving effectively on its own with very little effort, but it actually continues to carry the rest of this train, right? The weight of it is pulling the rest of the train. Therefore, it's almost infinitely moving in a direction. Like it actually takes a lot of effort to slow it down. We can look at other versions of this. Now, there's very modern versions, and this is what I want to talk about here for a minute. 'Cause I think this really, when I started digging in beyond kind of the principles he teaches in the book, these flywheels, here we go. These are what are in your modern cars today. And these flywheels, not only um, after some effort, begin to spin and carry themselves a lot less effort, but they also are able to capture and store energy, right? So how a car continues to charge itself along the way, right, is because it's able to capture and store energy. It's one of the things they're working on a great deal. I am no engineer, and I do not fully understand. I would even argue I don't hardly understand any of this, but conceptually, it's very interesting to think about how hard it is to get a flywheel like this started, but then ultimately boiling it down to what it's ultimately capable of in a modern car, where it not only creates energy for the car here's a version of it, but it actually recaptures energy that's produced by the car's movement itself and charges itself and charges the car and charges the battery. This is what they're working on with, like, a sustainable energy types of technology, because they have the ability to actually take a little bit of energy to get going and then be self-sustaining thereafter. How true could this be for your business? And I think this is where your lack of pushing the flywheel early backfires, because um, we're not building something just to work harder and harder and harder and harder. We're building something that is progressively harder until it gets significantly easier. And then think one day in the future where you have a business that is self-sustaining and building itself and providing for you and your team and other people around you. Mindset change. That's why it's so hard on the front end, because most people stay in the grind. They stay with the hard push. Things are going to happen for them if they continue to stay involved, but they never get over that hump that is going to carry them through and actually create a self-sustaining business like a flywheel that can store energy and continue to produce and produce and produce over time. So I want us to think hard about the effort that we're putting in and how much farther maybe we would be able to go if we just got over the hump, because it's hard. I get it. I had a hard year last year, a lot of new challenges. And I think that comes with growth for all of us. It comes with every level is going to have a different new challenge. And who can carry that through? Who can continue to push that flywheel? Because certain things are easier. It's funny. I think back on my business, man, if even in our worst months, if I could have even dreamed of that 10, 15 years ago, like that would be our best months. Right. And so your whole perspective changes because you're not working on the 1 and 2, kind of transactions anymore, right? You're building something that is helping a lot of people feed their families. So the burden gets greater, but even your baseline is greater, right, than where you started. And so continue to work that flow. I hope this conceptually, is a good is something that you can rely on through this week. All right. I want to share a couple things. I'm going to jump into a video here. Let me see if I can share this video. There we go. We're going to do some. We're going to try and see some stuff that's going on right now because I want to make sure we are building our businesses, staying in tune with what's going on in the world around us, and know how to handle that. What do we do with that information?
The housing market feels stuck. And that might be because it is stuck. Americans are staying in their homes for the longest time in a quarter of a century. That means that people are not upgrading, not downsizing, or even relocating or moving. And it's not because of nostalgia, it's because of simple math. Millions of homeowners are not eager to trade their 2% and 3% mortgages for a 6% and 7% mortgage. Also, in pricey coastal and north.
I'm going to stop there for just a second because talking about people staying in their homes 4.2 years, 15, 20 years ago, versus 8.6 years now, this is a dynamic shift in the market in which we operate, right? And so, this is one of those years where we've got to understand the flywheel concept and how it applies to something like this. We go back just to that visual here. I like to have something I'm looking at, 4.2 in 2000. So 25 years ago, 8.6. Because just, 10 years ago, we would say, man, if you've got how many people in your database, divide it by 5, right? That's how many of them are going to be moving this year, right? Simple math. Now, from when that was 4.2, that means your customer on average moves every 4 years. Now they're moving twice as long. So what does that mean for us in the industry who are building our businesses? We've got to change the way in which we function because we've got to have past clients for longer, twice as long, right, before they actually go and resell. And so this is something, and we're going to talk more about why, but I think it's important to understand that because when you build your business, if you build it on this concept of 4.2 and it really is 8.6, you're going to be half wrong in your projections, which is a killer, absolute killer. So we need to kind of reframe kind of how we're looking at the traditional business model. All right, let's keep going here. I'm going to jump to 2-minute mark here.
Still the lock-in of interest rates
but it's only going to go in one direction. Like it's not going that whatever the ratio is, it's getting more skewed to people with higher interest rate mortgages. Again, I don't want you to have a high interest rate mortgage, but it just means this whole idea of like I can't let go of my 3% is melting away, and that's what's going to change the housing market as long as you continue to get more supply on the market.
Yeah, but those places you mentioned that are skewing the data is not a supplier's market. I mean, New York, there's not a huge supply of new homes in New York. There's always
forget about New York.
Okay.
I mean, like
stop talking about New York City.
How about Connecticut?
No, not Connecticut either.
Connecticut.
How about like Indiana?
That's what I'm saying. There's a bifurcation.
I want to hit this because he was talking about the the blend of interest rates, right? And everybody being locked into an interest rate. Therefore, I'm in a house, I've got a 3% interest rate. Therefore, I must not move. I must hold on to what I've got. And he's arguing that, hey, what we're starting to see is as people have bought over the last 3-4 years, we've started to have a more of a blended average of an interest rate out there in the market. There's still going to be somebody holding on to that 2.9. I had a 2.9 for a while. We ended up selling the house, right? And so there are reasons that people sell irrelevant of interest rate. There's a lot of reasons people sell irrelevant of interest rate. And so as we are starting to see, we are going to start to see things open up because it's all somewhat relative. Like why someone is moving and selling versus what someone is going to be able to afford it for, maybe two very different decisions in terms of how they make that buying or selling decision. And so understanding that we are starting to see a blended average rate out there that is quite a bit higher than what we would have seen just a couple years ago is a big deal. Because as rates, if they do start to come down, there's going to be even more incentive for those folks that are in, 5, 6, 7, 8% interest rates, which are, kind of where we kind of peaked out, that are going to be saying, man, it may make sense to just make a move again, right? And if they bought over the last 3 or 4 years, in many markets, and I'll talk about this here again in a minute, in many markets, it still could make total sense to move. Let's jump forward here to minute 3, a couple points here.
Is at the top of the market.
Yeah.
So if the market is softening and these folks are coming in trying to get a 6% mortgage and they're saying, well, I can't afford this house at 6% at the price that they're asking, and they're lowballing a little. I do see that here in New York City. The people who are really stuck on getting their price end up taking their place off the market. The people who are flexible, probably even willing to take a loss, need to move for a life event or whatever, they're the ones that end up selling. So I don't know how much that unlocks the market, because there are enough people that are going to say, I don't want to take a hit on this like that.
Well, we're talking about, if people stay in these homes, you're talking about roughly a $38 trillion wealth transfer globally over the next decade. Yeah. And there are many reasons why people sell and move. It's a death of a spouse. It is you need to move to assisted living facility. You have to relocate for a job.
People love it. They love it so much they want to stay for over 10,
I
12
can't imagine
years.
people want to move into New Haven. Trust me.
They want to go to Merced.
I've been there. They may want to go to Merced.
Quickly, Dagan, you talked about that $1 trillion in wealth that's being held up, which is why, and I think maybe it's been Steve Moore who said this, but correct me if I'm wrong, where you want to see home price increase slow but not totally collapse, because there are so many homeowners who are sitting on wealth, and you don't want to see that wiped out if prices really start to fall. So similar to how we were talking about inflation earlier, you want wage gains to go faster than the price increase of the house, but you don't want the total house to actually fall in price because you have a lot of wealth tied up there.
Just a point on this, and I think it's critical to understand this. One, I go back constantly to remembering what happened in 2008. We had this massive housing crash. No one here is talking about a housing crash. They're talking about just the markets in general, the impacts of costs, the impacts of construction costs, the impacts of insurance costs, the impacts of the mortgage rates. The affordability is a factor. We had a home crisis, right? We had all homes, underlying assets. We were over-levered, like at an immense rate. The thing you've got to remember is that it took over 3 years for that market to bottom out. From peak to trough, over 3 years. And no one really remembers this because we remember hearing that it dropped just like that. And so the challenge is, when we're making buying decisions and selling decisions, how long does it actually take a market in free fall, specifically in real estate? And here's the reason why. It's not a consumable in the way that many commodities are, right? It's not. It doesn't have a price that is dictated. It's a market-based price. Stocks move very efficiently, right? You see stocks go up and down a couple percent here per day. For a home to transact, how long does it take? It goes time on market, and then you've got 30, 60 days. You're going to have appraisals, right? So you have these little data points along the way in any market, especially in a market like we've had where there's been less transactions. The speed at which the market could shift and change downward or upward is dramatic. Upward, I would say, almost happens in 21 was an exceptional experience because you would have people making transfers from their penthouse in New York to a single family home in Orlando, and they would want it. They would have the money to do it. They would buy it with cash. If they're buying with cash, I mean, you're not over leveraging. They've determined what they feel the value is, and they've made that purchase. So we saw some data points start to move up quickly, right? Looking back, almost none of those people feel like they made a bad decision because they took money out of one asset, they moved it into another, they got more house for their money, and they're still in an equity position, right? The market has moved positively since then. There's a small grouping of people, and we're seeing this a little bit right now, and this is just kind of boots on the ground, just kind of what we're seeing. There's a small group of people that are in the 20, probably 23, that bought new construction. Most of them, not all of them. Some of them just, maybe you just overpaid with the excitement of what was going on. I needed a house. I overpaid. Now I'm moving. And so there's people in that space, right? And so the assumption is that that was a fair price for the house. They may have just simply overpaid at that point because the macro market, at least here in Orlando, for the most part, when I say macro market, I mean take it all into whole, has continued to be steady or slight upward growth since then. Not a lot. But there are micro markets where there is still new construction happening, where if you bought it 3 years ago, you're essentially competing with the guy that built your house right down the street. You can buy the same thing brand new. That's just a tough space to deal in, right? Anytime you're turning a house over a 3-year period, we should not believe that is normal. That should not be normalized. 3 years in a house should not be normalized. And so I say all this to say, listen to these stories, pay attention to the headlines, and then look for yourself and understand what's going on. Because no one thing is true. We have micro markets throughout all of Orlando, throughout all of Central Florida. The Kissimmee market, and I had this conversation with an agent the other day who was trying to refer me a potential seller. And she said, what is the average days on market? I said, 35 to 40 based on the area in which she was talking about. She goes, why would another agent I talked to tell me over 100 days? So I don't know why another agent would tell you that. That's not what we're experiencing in the market. I said the one thing that would be true is that if they're looking at a macro market or a subsect of a market, that very well may be true in that market. We've got a community kind of in the Disney area where the community, if you just look at the availability of homes in that community, there's like 40 months of supply. These are all second homes, investments, right? There's like 40 months of supply just because they're not transacting regularly at a high level, right? So when I say supply, I mean how many are on the market versus how often they actually sell. And you've got to remember the people selling these are making money on them too because they are often rented, et cetera. So there's going to be a trade-off. How much is it worth as a rental? How much is it worth in the marketplace? So they're only going to go so low to make a transaction. And so it's very important that we are aware to be able to have these conversations with our customers to really help them make the best decisions that they possibly can make. So I hope this has been a helpful exercise, and think about the flywheel this week. Think about the flywheel. Think about where you're getting stuck and where you're stopping the push, wherein that will start to carry you and your business forward in perpetuity. And years from now, you're going to look back and say, man, that effort was well worth it. Have a good rest of your Wednesday.